Welcome everybody to the Commissioner's Confessional. Sorry, that ended rather quickly. I'm Alex Connock. We're going to make this an opportunity for Commissioners to get off their chest what it's really like to be a Commissioner. It's sort of catharsis moment. And also an opportunity for producers, which is probably most of the people in the room, to get a bit of insight into what's life like behind enemy lines. Because you're all an audience of TV producers, you necessarily have a fairly short attention span. So what you can look forward to is, at the end, we're going to be playing a game of Lingo Bingo. And you should have a card to play that. So we're going to be playing a hilarious game, and yes, you need a pen as well. And if you look in your bags, you should find a pen. But if you don't have a pen, perhaps you can talk to one of the ushers, and I'm sure they'll find you one. But it's really fun. It's a great tape. So let's meet the panel. First off, we have Phil Edgar Jones, Channel Controller at Sky Arts and former Commissioner for Entertainment at Sky. Phil, you, prior to joining commissioning, you were actually in the real world of producers. What was it like moving from poacher to gamekeeper?
I like this real world and enemy lines thing. That's obviously. So we'll talk about that maybe. No, it's sort of interesting actually. One of the first things I noticed that suddenly my jokes got funnier, which was a big revelation to me, because I always thought it was funny, and suddenly I seemed to be. But one of the most interesting things for me actually, when moving across from pitching shows and producing shows, was the amount of selling you have to do when you're a commissioner too. When I was head of entertainment, it wasn't just me going, oh, I'll have that. You know, you had to sell it to a channel head, you have to sell it to sort of marketing people, PR people, and to various sort of stakeholders within the organisation. So the selling doesn't stop when you're a commissioning editor.
Well, that's great, because we're actually going to do 3 sections today. We're going to do the pitch process, then the selling up process that Phil's just mentioned, and then we're going to do the what's it like when you're actually producing the show process. So you've queued it up brilliantly, Phil.
Thank you.
Alison, you are acting head of factional events at the BBC and previously head of commissioning and formats and features. That's right?
Yeah.
How many ideas do you think you've ever been pitched?
Oh, God. Thousands. That's probably tens of thousands. A lot.
How many in a day?
It's slightly different in my job now, but when I was head of a subgenre, how many in a day? In a meeting, you can be pitched 10, so like 60 in a day.
And do you ever have you ever had that moment where you just go, my God, that's it. That's going to happen. That's a great idea.
I don't know if anyone was at Charlotte's session today, but she got asked what was easier to say, a no or a yes. And I feel quite strongly that the yeses are easier to say, because when you see the right idea, I think it is quite clear. You don't know if it's going to go on to be a hit, but it's a very obvious moment when someone pitches something that feels right for your channel and really distinctive and exciting. The no's are harder because you know they're hard to receive. So just out of sort of basic common decency, you don't like having to give a lot of
I think also none of us really want to say no. It's painful. It chips away at your soul a little bit, in truth.
Do you have that moment where you're working, how long do I indulge this speech before I just say no?
You do, but I think it's important to give a clear no. So I always say to the factual team, the worst thing you can do is have someone leave a meeting and give a sort of lot of ambivalent maybes, or even worse, a sort of encouraging almost yes, that people go away and do development work and waste resources. I think it's really important that we are clear and give early no's on things that we know aren't going to work.
Brilliant. Greg, you're commissioning editor for Factual Entertainment at 5.
Hello.
What's the biggest myth that people have about pitching and commissioning?
That there is some kind of science or art to it, I would say. That we are scientists and kind of micro-analyse things, and there is some kind of winning formula to commissioning. There isn't. A lot of it is luck. In fact, nearly all of it is probably luck, I would say.
And do you not bring data to it? Do you not bring analytics? And
yeah, there is. Obviously, there is all of that. I mean, there are, as soon as you have a hit show, you kind of go, oh, well, that works. Could we do anything, similar? We know our successes. We know our failures. We know, depending on what channel we are, what our strategy is for that hour. In the case of Channel 5, we know that we're against soap for 4 nights of the week in the 8 o'clock hour. So we're only going to score a win against a soap-avoiding audience. So there are kind of very helpful bits of information you can give to your suppliers to kind of take away and go and think about. But to concur with Alison, a good idea is a good idea.
One myth I've heard about Channel 5 is that if a pitch has the words Ben Fogle in it, it necessarily gets commissioned. Is that true?
I think Ben Fogle would like that. No, it's not true.
How many pitches do you think you have today that are supposedly Ben Fogle's favourite idea?
Can I just state for the record, I am the commissioning editor for Ben Fogle, so obviously I get a lot of them and it will save everyone a lot of time afterwards. And obviously Ben wants to kind of expand on his experience as a presenter, if we are being deadly serious, which I think we are. So I get a lot, of course I do, because people do that thing of, well, Ben Fogle, New Lives in the Wild, which is a great show for us made by Renegade Productions and Group M Entertainment, does massive ratings for us and is going into its 5th series. Okay, that's the promotion for the channel over. But you take the talent, and we're not a channel that can afford to do golden handcuff talent deals. And so, of course, there are indies out there that are going, oh, he works on their channel in that format, so let's think of something else for Ben Fogle to do. So, yeah, I've got a stack of Ben Fogle ideas, thank you. No more.
Which, by the way, you know, again, if we are being serious and people want to take something from the session, that's probably not a good strategy to develop stuff that is similar to things that are already working on the channel. Invariably, that's what we're not looking for, because we have it already. So when Back in Time worked really well for us on BBC Two, I started to get a load of pictures of, like, we'll take a family and we'll put them through holidays through the ages, and you want something different. So I think that's the wrong way to go about it.
Well, talking of Ben Fogle, we have a prestigious prize for the winner of Lingo Bingo, which is not only a signed picture of Ben Fogle, but also has a meerkat. I'm told they couldn't get the meerkat's signature, but that is quite a prize, so take it seriously. And finally, we have David Brindley, commissioning editor in Docs at Channel 4. You were also in Indie Land before that. You worked at 2-4. What was it like the first time you had to take a pitch from your erstwhile bosses at 2-4 when it was after you joined Channel 4?
I can remember it quite clearly. Actually, I think it was probably about 3 years ago. I was quite sweaty palmed about the whole thing and a bit nervous about it, because I just thought the whole thing was slightly ridiculous, in truth. And so I, went off, tried to make a cup of tea, delay it for a few minutes, and then walked into the room. I was going to be extremely professional and just sort of crack on with talking about ideas. And then just had a total meltdown and went, "This is completely weird and totally odd. And can we just have an amnesty to say about how odd this dynamic is at the moment? And can we just talk about some ideas?" And then we all sat around and tried to make some good telly, which is ultimately what everyone's trying to do in commissioning land. So of course that power dynamic is slightly odd, but I think as soon as you enter a room and think that you are all powerful and almighty and all knowing, that's the beginning of the end, I think.
When you take this job, do they give you a course in kind of how to conduct a meeting and how to offer tea and coffee?
Absolutely not.
No.
So
no such thing.
no,
I can't think of how to be a commissioner course.
No, although do you know what? Now they have introduced one at Channel 4. So now new commissioners do go through a bit of a sort of how-to. But no, you sit at your desk and sort of go.
In a way, sometimes you have to make a load of mistakes. I mean, when I first started, because I come from a producing background like yourself, my instinct always was to encourage ideas. So I ended up with sort of encouraging ideas that were kind of half-baked, and I didn't shut things down quick enough. So I learned very quickly not to do that. You know, and then I don't like doing that thing where people say, "Can I come and have a cup of tea and see what you're looking for?" Because inevitably I then say things that come back to me as ideas, and they're not really, and so I mean, often the best things just come out of a conversation. Of course they do, but I mean, you sort of learn to temper your own habits quite quickly when you become a commissioner, I think.
What's the weirdest place you've ever been pitched a show?
In the toilets here, having a wee. Urinal a couple of years ago. It was like, I'm having a wee.
What was the show?
I can't remember. I was like, please don't do this.
Right, let's get on to the meat of this. So we've got the holy trinity of commissioning, the pitch, the sell-up, and then the production. We've got a little film to introduce the pitch, and let's have it now. Okay, so let's talk about the pitch in more detail. David, how much of your time do you actually spend hearing ideas?
A lot of time. I mean, whether that's in meetings or ideas that come through emails, probably half of my time, maybe 40% of my time, something like that, and the rest is on delivery and dealing with production and getting things.
So if you get into Channel 4 in the morning and you look at your diary, does it say kind of 9 a.m. pitch, 10 a.m. pitch, 11? And do you look happily upon that diary, or do you think, oh God?
Well, I mean, I try not to take sort of like 10 a day and back to back, so that's no good for you or for the people that are coming to pitch. So I probably have 3 or 4 pitch meetings a day, probably, and the rest of that time then is taken up by channel management and delivery.
And if you get 5 minutes into a meeting and they've just used all their ideas and you've said no to them, Do you cut the meeting short or do you carry on for the full hour?
Well, I much prefer sort of people to come in and be very honest about the fact that maybe, I think I took a meeting a few weeks ago in August, and the Indie came in and said, do you know what, everyone's on holiday, including quite a lot of people in our production company. I'll be honest with you, we've just got one idea, and after that the meeting is pretty much done, so should we talk about that? And it turned into one of the most productive meetings that we'd had, because we heard the one idea. It was actually in a similar space to something that we were already doing, but then we had just a really free-ranging discussion about the kind of things that we're looking for at the moment, and start to brainstorm a few ideas. And in a way, that was as productive of somebody coming in with, a list of 25 ideas with your name at the top. And I felt more invigorated after that meeting than just being sort of
and then
lots of ideas.
Everyone always tries to understand the maths of this, and I know it's not a precise art, but what percentage do you think of ideas that you ever get pitched you take forward in any way?
That's really difficult because it varies massively. But I mean, at the moment, to give you an idea, I've probably got 8 biggish series on my slate, four, bearing in mind I mainly do series, 4 or 5 single films, and 6 or 7 developments. So in total, that's 20 odd ideas, and I will easily have heard twice that many a week. So obviously it's a smallish percentage.
And if something's at a formal development stage, like you describe, what are the chances, percentage-wise, of it then getting commissioned?
I mean, again, I'm not quite sure the conversion rate from us backing a development to actually it being made, but at that point you've got real interest from a channel. We're willing to put money behind it. There's no point in we're big believers in not saying, do you know what, here's $2,000 essentially to go away. That doesn't help anybody. So at the moment that we say, we're going to put $5,000 in or whatever, that means genuinely we want to make that happen, and this is seed capital rather than sort of wish money, if you like. So we'd hope that the majority of those developments that we put money into come off.
We'd be the same actually. We don't sort of develop stuff and certainly pay for it without thinking something's going to come of it. And even if it's sometimes things come back and they're not quite right from that paid development, but we'll keep going with it because we're sort of passionate about the general data. So the conversion rate from that kind of development into commissions is pretty high.
And if you give something development money, do you have to get authority from someone other than yourself, or is that purely at your discretion?
A mixture, really. I'll usually speak to Nick, who's head of docs, and we'll decide to put something through into development, just so that there's a central pot and we have a certain amount of development. So as a department, we need to ensure that we're using it wisely. But other than that, we're pretty free to use development money as we wish.
Alison, what's the worst case scenario in the pitch situation? How can it go wrong for someone?
Well, David just used the word pummel. I think those are the worst kinds of meetings where people come in. Sometimes people come in with a list of like 25, 30 ideas, and they just batter through them. And I just don't think it's possible to have 25, 30 really promising, original, exciting ideas for a particular channel. Interestingly, in those meetings, in my experience, often the best ideas are the ones that are right at the end. Mm-hmm. So people tend to, when meetings go badly, they've got a lot of ideas. They tend to be quite similar, as I said, to stuff that's already on the channel. They're sort of their safe banker ideas, and they aren't as exciting. And then right at the end, when you're almost out of time for the meeting, they'll often suddenly say, oh, well, we've got this one other thing. I don't think it's right for you. And that's the gem, and you really wish that they'd just come in with 1 or 2 of those, and you'd had the time to discuss that.
So it's a sort of Columbo strategy of like the left field idea is the best one.
That's a much better starting place, at least. You'd much rather start with something that feels harder or more unlikely and rein it back in than take something quite safe and predictable and try and sort of produce excitement into it.
And I've seen lots of development teams agonise over whether to bring in a paragraph or a brilliantly formatted PowerPoint or a tape.
Always a paragraph.
Right. But wouldn't that then risk being half-baked, to your point?
Well, no. I mean, if you come in with an idea that you're passionate. See, this is the other thing. When I sort of first noticed, I sort of felt if you start to feel like you're just being sold at, it can be a bit challenging, I think, in my experience. But if people come in with 1 or 2 ideas that they're absolutely 100% passionate about, it doesn't really matter what they come in with, in a way. If it's a paragraph, if it's a top line, if it's a thought, or if it's an entire PowerPoint. And the trouble with PowerPoint, of course, is you get to the first page and you've already decided you're either interested or you don't. You have to get through the whole thing.
The other thing with PowerPoint is people do the thing where they have the PowerPoint and they read it to you while the PowerPoint's up, and it's like, I can read it, it's there. Like, so it's better to have a dialogue about
Although
it.
I got once, I pitched to somebody had a PowerPoint and they didn't read it out, so we had to go like that.
I think tapes can be good as well, but really informal tapes, often just shot on an iPhone, a bit of talent that you think is exciting in their genuine situation in life.
Skype interviews are really helpful now as well. That's
Which one, sorry?
Skype interviews. It's free and easy to do, but bringing in idea of the kind of family that might be in the centre of this programme or the kind of talent that you might bring to it.
We did a session last year on the sizzle tape, and I think the general view was keep it quite short and quite sort of freestyle rather than an actual example of the programme. Greg, what are the best sorts of, please name the companies if you can, but what are the best types of pitches that you've ever received?
I can do both of those. It largely depends on what it is that we're after. So those who are familiar with the Channel 5 commissioning strategy now under Ben Frout is that we commission in quarterly budget rounds, and we're only a commissioning team of 6. So prior to those rounds, we get a clear briefing from Ben where he sets out what are the channel needs, and we put that out there to our suppliers, and they come back with either focused 9 o'clock ideas or 8 o'clock ideas or whatever it is that it happens to be that we are after. So I think that kind of makes the process for indies a bit easier. I get a mixture of taster tapes. I think we'd all agree that we're looking for people to kind of stand out. It's like going for the X Factor audition, I think, pitching and ultimately getting a commission. Okay, not all of us want to hand out cash pots full of development money, as David and each of us have said. It doesn't mean that we don't, but actually, I'm not saying that we're expecting people to blood, sweat and tears and input their life savings into a commission that they may or may not get away, but just what can you do to stand out and make a difference, be it a Skype interview, be it a bit of tape that you've cut together, a selection of clips from the internet or something, just to give us a flavour, and it really, really will make a difference. I'm not saying come in and stand on your head to do a commission because, to go for a pitch because, I'll remember that person, but it is that kind of stand out way of selling your idea or idea you have of way you have of making your idea stand out that is going to kind of help us. 3 really good production companies at pitching in my experience are Daisy Beck, ITN and 2-4.
And what makes them good?
Daisy Beck is all about the MD or the CD, who I know embarrassingly is in the room, so I won't embarrass him. But I think Paul is an amazing pitcher. He's a great showman and a brilliant seller. If you've ever had the fortune of a meeting with him, I think he's great with talent. And great with kind of selling an idea. He doesn't always get it right. She can kill me afterwards. And there have been issues where he has kind of dropped to his knees and gone, please take this idea. I really want to make this idea. And I've literally sat there like Dawn French and gone, the short answer is no. And the long answer is no. You are not listening to me. This won't work on the channel. ITN always kind of do well out of my kind of commissioning, my budget rounds. So gold star to them. But again, they have success because I think they are an example of an indie that, certainly in my case, A, listen, and B, focus on the channel. They kind of understand the channel and understand what it is that the channel is trying to do, where we spend the money, and what we're up against, because we are smallest terrestrial and we are default viewing. And 2-4 are just very, very good pitchers. They've got good ideas and pitch them very well.
Alison, do you think there's sometimes a contradiction inherent in the way channels ask for material? Because they, on the one hand, they say, we want to legislate for exactly the slots we want to fill, and we want programs like this, and at 8 p.m. we want this and that, and we want features like this. And at the other hand, they say, please come and surprise us. And there's sort of paradox there. I mean, either you're filling a round peg into a round hole, or you're coming in with the wild card.
Yeah, I think it is a really delicate balance. We have to be careful that we're not too prescriptive with our steers, because otherwise, we're not going to reimagine our output. Just picking up on some of the things just said, in terms of standing out when you pitch, I wouldn't want anyone to take away, certainly from a BBC perspective, from that it is like an X Factor audition, and you have to, it's about the presentation that will make you stand out. Mm-hmm. For me, the thing that makes it stand out is it's something inherent in the approach to the idea or the idea itself. And so, to give you a couple of examples, Rookies on ITV at the moment, which I think is a great series, and for anyone who is in Charlotte's session, we've got this new ambulance series coming up on BBC One. access to police or to the emergency, ambulance, they're not original. People have made programs around that kind of access before. But in both those series, there's something inherent in the approach to the access that makes it feel particular. So Rookies, you're seeing it through the eyes of this new generation of police officers. In the ambulance series, it's seen through the prism of shortages and those sort of decisions where you've got two people who need an ambulance and you're sort of looking from a bird's eye view, where do you send it? It's all about lack of resources. So there's something particular inherent within the idea that makes it stand out. So for me at least, I think the most important thing is the idea and not the presentation of the idea. Sometimes people can bring you ideas and they're really not very good pictures. They don't realise how brilliant what they're bringing you is, and that's fine as long as the idea is there.
Phil, we're in the age of data and Google Analytics. Is it possible now to come in with a pitch which has some sort of data backing it? It's got this number of views on YouTube, or it's got this profile on Google and what have you. And would that ever tilt you towards something from a sort of marketing analysis point of view?
We do our own data analysis, of course, at Sky quite a lot on all the channels. So we're always looking at what audiences are responding to, particularly in behind the sort of paywall where we exist. But I don't really, I've never come across a pitch. No one's ever pitched me something from that point of view. No one's ever come in and said, this particular person has X number of views on YouTube, so you must make a TV series out of them. Because we know often that those things don't necessarily convert onto television very well anyway. Because they live in a particular universe that isn't necessarily our universe. I'm also I'm really interested in data and how we use it. And we recently created a musical using computer algorithms to create the musical. So we were trying to work out how you'd make the perfect hit musical. Because I was thinking if that really works, we can create the perfect hit TV show off the back of it as well. And it was a brilliant musical. It was full of cliches, though, of course, as you'd imagine, because it's done by an algorithm. But no, I don't know. I mean, is the kind of honest answer. It's always going to come back to, is the idea good? Is it a good approach? Particularly in my area, you can come in and say, look, I've got a great painting idea, but how are you going to do it? Is the question I'm always. All
right, final question. Has any of you ever let one of the sort of famous showbiz stories? Is any of you prepared to admit to having let go an idea that actually went on somewhere else to become a massive hit?
I'm hanging myself out to dry here. I'm the volunteer. I said no to Undercover Boss. When Studio Lambert bought it. And I think I would still say no to it for the reason that I gave. I felt like it was too close to Back to the Floor, which had obviously been a BBC brand. And on that basis, I felt we would either bring Back to the Floor back or do Undercover Boss. And so I said no to it. It's obviously been a big hit for Channel 4.
Okay, let's move on. So the next section is all about selling upwards, meaning selling from the commissioning editor to the channel controller, and we have a tape. Alison, let's start with you. What is the process? Once as a commissioner, you like something, what happens then?
So it depends whether you're a commissioner or a head of department. If you're a commissioner, you've got to get their buy-in from your head of department. So whether it's docs or formats or specialist factual. And then once they concur and they like it, you'll be taking it to a channel routine. And when you take it to a channel routine, typically, well, at the BBC at least, I can't speak for the other channels, you will be talking to the controller of the channel, and they will typically have their scheduler with them as well as potentially a channel exec. And it depends who the channel controller is. I've worked under a lot of different channel controllers, and sometimes it's really collegial and it's a real dialogue, and sometimes it's more formal. But certainly your job at that stage is to persuade the controller that this is the right decision to make, and that it fits within the strategy, it's sensible when considered with the other things that sit alongside it in the slate. We don't get to make as many decisions as people think we do. And if we talk about the funnel that you were describing, the volume of ideas that come in, you're going down to sort of very few choices, so the choices are incredibly precious. I think it becomes easier the more experienced you are as a commissioner, partly because you know how to handle the meetings, but partly it's about trust and relationships. And if you've delivered to the channel well and you have a track record of commissioning and delivering programs that have worked for the channel, they'll have more confidence in what you're bringing.
So one of the things that indies mystify over is once an idea makes it to that meeting, what are its percentage chances of success?
It depends on the commissioner. I mean, I think when I started as a commissioner, the percentage chance was probably about 40%. And I think by the time I finished as a commissioner, the percentage chance was probably about 85, 90%, because I was just better at my job and I had a stronger, more trusting relationship with the controller. Part of it's timing, other things that are coming through the door, where you are in the financial year. But I hope, you know, I think I certainly encourage my team to say no to more things so that they are really concerting efforts around things they really believe in. They're taking fewer things into the channel and the decisions are easier and clearer.
What's the single thing that a producer can do to make your job in that meeting as easy as possible?
I think the whole system all the way through works best if it is a partnership, when you're working with the producers. So they've brought you the idea, it might just be a top line, you've developed it together, you've discussed it, you really understand it, you understand the fabric of it. You may really be required to sell it in that controller's room. So the more information you have to hand and that you understand about the nature of the idea, the better a job you'll be able to do. Also, to a certain degree, patience. Sometimes, you know, we aim to make really quick decisions, but sometimes the journey will be iterative. You know, Well for Less, which has been a big hit for me and for the department, was a process that took sort of 2.5 years. Richard McCarrow famously tells the story that Bake Off he'd pitched, you know, for 6 years, I think. So to some degree, patience and really consolidating around the belief that this is the right idea, and we may have to iterate it a few times, but we'll get there if we all believe in it.
David, that pitch-up meeting, is that what they call a Channel 4 creative breakfast?
No, that's different.
Right.
Yes.
So what is it at Channel 4 then? Is it the same process as Alison described at the BBC?
Very similar process. So we all commissioners get ideas in. I have a weekly routine with Nick, my boss, and then we'll talk about ideas. And from then, one or two things happens. Either as a department, we might all talk about it. So we also have a weekly session where all the commissioners from DOPS get together and throw in lots of ideas. When we might say, do you know what, we think there's something in this. We're all quite excited about it, but we can't quite. We don't quite think it's right to take it to Jay at the moment. And so we'll all then talk about it, and maybe from that point on decide that we'll take it into a Jay routine. And then once a fortnight we have a routine with Jay. Again, she has her scheduler with her, and so that's it. We then pitch all of our ideas to her. And in terms of what makes a good idea and a relationship beneficial in terms of between a commissioner and indie, I think I want to feel as passionate about that idea at the point of pitching it to Jay as that indie did when they pitched it to me. Otherwise, something's a bit wrong. Really, I should leave the room and be gutted if I didn't get it away, or really happy when I do get it away. So if you're feeling a bit mediocre about an idea, it's probably quite a good steer that that maybe it's not the best thing to be pitching. So and so having as much information as possible, as broader and deeper dialogue as possible with the indie beforehand, so that you feel like you know as much as the exec might have done when
is that the moment for an indie to invest in making a tape? At the moment when they know you're taking it forward?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, before that, tapes, it depends, if there's a specific character that the whole idea is dependent on, then probably, yes, we might want to see that person and we'll probably put some money in to do that. But, one of the biggest things that are coming up next year came off a piece of A4 paper and never got a tape, and we actually all just sat around with an indie, threw it around a bit, and then I pitched to Jay. Jay, thought it was a good idea, and it got off the ground. And that's a big series. So
what is that?
It has been announced, so I'm allowed to say. It's a series that Dragonfly are making about a trial next year. So we're fictionalising a trial.
I think, Greg, Channel 5 has a super flat organisational structure, so 6 commissioners and then a boss, basically. Yeah. So is it any different from Channel 4 and BBC? Or?
Not really. Well. Except, different from BBC because we have no longer any heads of department. But yeah, we all funnel into Ben, and Ben has quite openly admitted that it's only worth having a relationship with, say, 2 or 3 commissioning editors at Channel 5 just to save people in the room time, because we all get the same brief from Ben when it comes to the run-up to commissioning round. It's just that each of us has our own kind of specialty because we have all worked in the production sector to varying degrees. But you can come and talk to me about any idea in any form, and as Alison quite rightly says, it's about the idea at the end of the day. So as long as it's right, don't be scared as long as you're passionate about it.
All right, and then Phil, finally, you are the person you're commissioning to.
I'm Darth
do
Vader
you have meetings with yourself, or do you, I mean, how do you gatekeep your own ideas?
I'm disappointed you didn't wear the outfit.
Is there anyone who's
I have
commissioned?
meetings with myself.
So
right?
could you do crazy things like commission 14 hours of Wagner or something like that, just without asking anyone?
Yes, I can. If I'd asked anyone, they'd have said, "You idiot, what are you doing?" No, so in fact, it all broadly works in the same way at Sky. Each of the genre teams is a non-scripted team, there's a drama team and a comedy team, mostly, and they will interrogate an idea amongst themselves before bringing it to myself, or if it's for Sky One, to Adam or Zai at Sky Atlantic. And generally, we're getting what I want to see from a commissioner as well is that passion that a producer has for an idea when they're coming to sell it. So all the information that they need should be there before they sort of come to me with it. And we work sort of informally and formally in a way, because we all sit close to each other in Sky. All the channel heads sit close to each other, all the genre heads and the various commissioners sit close to each other. So we will sometimes have, if they've got an idea they quite like, they'll sometimes come up to me and say, well, is this worth maybe having another conversation about? And we'll say yes or no. And then we have a formal meeting every second Thursday where we clear the day and we have a commissioning day, basically. So we'll decide which ideas to take forward and which ideas to kill there and then. And that's when we get sort of more formal pitches from the commissioning editors, and I'll have my scheduling person with me, press person and marketing person, because we work quite collaboratively there. Because I want a sort of it's quite democratic in a way, even though I probably have the final decision. If a commissioner or a genre head is incredibly passionate about something, that's the chance that it will happen.
And then if an idea does get killed, how do you all feel about that moment you have to ring up the indie and tell them that the idea that you had both believed in?
Terrible.
It's awful.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Especially if you wanted it to happen as much as the indie. I mean,
Yeah.
At that point, you've got as much, well, not as much, but you're invested in it in the same way, and it's disappointing.
Well, then if I sort of way, that might make it easier, because at least you can say, I did my best, I really believed in it.
It doesn't make the news any better.
It doesn't. And can I say, absolutely, in that situation, which is a horrible situation, it absolutely has to be a phone call.
Yeah, it can't be
It
anything.
can't be anything else, because
yeah.
you've all been on such a journey, and
You see this thing when people are new to commissioning, that they sometimes just want to win business. I mean, weirdly, to your point, like about us selling up, commissioners have that same sensibility that when they get a commission from a controller, they're winning business in the same way the indies feel they are, and they want to win business for business winning sake. And that's so the wrong way to go about it. And David's right, you need to be really passionate and want to make that particular idea when you go into the channel controller's room, because afterwards, when it works best, you're going to be in partnership with the indie delivering it. And so I think as you get better at it, you only take those ideas you love in, and then it's awful. You've worked with someone, you've developed something, you've sort of had your heart set on it, and you've got relationships with suppliers. We've all got particular relationships with suppliers, and it's terrible.
Well, you brilliantly queued up our third section, which was when it does succeed, and you are in partnership with indie, the producing of the idea, and we have another film.
very good.
Well done to Anna and Will, by the way, from
Great.
Princess for making those. They're
Absolutely.
fantastic. Phil, what's the best approach to this stage? Is it hands-on, hands-off?
Well, I think a light touch is always a good idea. I mean, it depends on how the project's going. I mean, we do, I think, have a light touch at Sky across projects. It's interesting, when I first started in the commissioning world, I sort of spotted three types of producer. And I probably can say there's three types of commissioner as well. There's three types of producer where everyone's really keen on you until they get your business. And then there's a type of producer who will not take any notes from you and thinks you're an idiot. And then there's another type of producer who will take every single note down and do everything you say, which is not massively helpful. And of course, obviously I'm going to say that thing in the middle is the best kind of producer and commissioner relationship, where it's utterly collaborative all along the way, and people trust each other and are able to share bad news quickly without sort of fear to a commissioner, and where a commissioner is able to sort of, give a point of view, but then have a healthy discussion about whether or not that's the right point of view.
So somewhere buried in the contracts for these productions, somewhere is always that horrible clause of, we can take this show over if we want to. Have you ever had to do that?
No.
Never read that
All right.
clause. I didn't know that clause
I didn't know
existed.
that. Does that clause exist?
It does in some broadcasters, absolutely. In fact, in some of them, it even says we can take this to another production company with some of the Americans.
Wow.
Yeah. So, Alison, do you get training at the BBC on how to be a commissioner of a show once it's going on, or is it just something
We don't have formal training, but one of the things I'm trying to do is informally, people come fresh, and I know from my experience you make loads of mistakes, and they are useful in that you learn from them, but hopefully we can avoid people replicating them. So we're trying to do sort of more informal mentoring internally. If I'm ever asked for advice, I think the most useful time is pre-production. And I always recommend, certainly if it's a big project, like a new series, a challenging, something that's particularly important in your slate, put in regular routines. And by regular, you'll judge it. It might be every 2 weeks, it might be every 3 weeks, it might be once a month. But it's at those early stages that you want to make sure that your ambitions for the project are aligned and that you're all heading in the same direction. Because, there have been moments, I know, on projects where people get into the edit and someone's down the lens or not down the lens, and they thought it'd be the res. It's like, I thought I thought they were looking to camera at in the piece of camera. Oh no, they weren't. Did we not discuss this? And even at a most basic level. So you really have to. I think those early conversations around what's the tone that we're aspiring for, who are we trying to reach with this, what are we trying to do, that's the way to avoid the project going tragically wrong, I think. So I think pre-production is important. I don't think you should be massively interfering, but have regular meetings. If at all possible, go to the indie, spend time with the whole production team so that you're also talking to the PDs or the researchers. So that's the sort of first bit of engagement, I think. And then it tends to go a bit quieter unless, I guess, it's a studio show where they're actually making it and filming it. And then you re-engage in the edit. And I think what you most usefully bring in the edit is perspective. Because, I think we've all made programmes in the past, and we all know that when you're making the programme, you get so close to it. And there's a point in the edit where you sort of, you're too close to have that perspective. And the commissioner can come in that stage usefully with perspective, and I think in an ideal world just give macro notes. A commissioner should be unhappy if you're getting to the point where you're doing pages of fine cut notes. That's always a project that's gone wrong and not something we aspire to.
Do you think the curse of digital editing is that it's now possible to give 75 rounds of feedback because it's actually relatively easy to sit someone down at a laptop and change things around?
Endlessly.
Yeah, but do you ever get to the point where you think, well, look, it's not perfect, but we'll just have to go with this, because...
Well, someone once said to me, and I really think this is true, the job of the commissioner is not just to make it different, it's only to make it better. Any film could be done in a myriad number of different ways, and we're not making the films. So we have to respect the authorship of the team making it. We're there to make it better if it needs to get better. And as I said, hopefully just in a macro type of way. And, I always say to people, the pre-titles is the most important thing. The first 10 minutes is the most important thing. You shouldn't be fiddling around in minute 50 around a particular shot or a bit of an early out in an interview. That's not our role in the process.
So, Greg, you were obviously a producer before you became a commissioner. What have you managed to import from your producing experience into your commissioning experience?
I go into every situation, I take the piss, but I do it for a very important reason, because I have been in the situation where I've been either the AP or the SP, and the ComEd has come in and gone and looked at the timeline and gone, is that the very best footage you've got? And then I've kind of sat there and gone, how would I feel if I said that to myself? No, we knew you were coming, so we just found a few scraps up the corner and put them on a timeline for your benefit. Of course, nobody gets out of bed to do a rubbish job on a daily basis, and it is really hard. And there are, surveys out there about which broadcaster micromanages the most, and I'm sure we're all, for that reason, quite scared of doing it. But it is very important that the programme is right. I'm not naming them. I'm merely making a point. But like Alison says, we are there to make the programme.
Need to come back on that.
We are.
Why are you being defensive about it?
I thought I was supposed to.
Stir it up. But coming back to the programme, you kind of go in, I would concur actually, I think Alison speaks very well about it. If you're having a good day, you go in, people have listened to you, and it is our job to kind of put things right. I think some commissioning editors get it wrong and think they've got to go in and they've got to give notes and they've got to find something wrong with something there isn't fundamentally anything wrong with in the first place. And for that reason, I think, Alison, you articulated that brilliantly. We are there to make it better. I've had days when I've had to sit at a kitchen table and do that dreaded thing of going, right, what have we got here, and put the show together. Again, not naming names. And it's not great when it happens, but it does happen. But I've also had very brilliant and rewarding moments where I've walked into an edit and go, hurrah, I can go for a swim now. It's amazing. Thank you very much. And
if you haven't to give a whole pile of notes, something's gone wrong in the process.
Correct.
Of course it has, hasn't it?
But do you think it's sort of an axiom of show business that of any 10 projects, just 1 or 2 just always will not match up to whatever they were supposed to be, and it's just one of those things?
Definitely, but you shouldn't be finding out in the edit. I mean, that's the point about the relationship and working with the team. It's a disaster if you're finding out in the edit. So I would say to suppliers, I think as a commissioner it's really useful if you've made programmes, and we've all made programmes and we know that things will go wrong, but don't hide it from us. Like, we should be a team working with you and tell us early.
Honesty makes programmes, which is the best
That's
bit of
also
advice
bad news
I was
travels
ever
fast,
given.
good news can wait.
And that is all about the relationship thing. It's a very important point. If you are honest with me, if you're honest with each of us, I think we'd all say the same, then we all want to row the boat in the same direction, not round in a circle. So
I remember as well, as a producer, I a couple of occasions been given so many notes. Maybe I just did a shit job, but so many notes, I had completely lost sight of what I was actually making in the end. And I think that's really a key thing for people who are making programs. They have to have the sort of blinkers on to some extent and be making their vision of it.
The key thing for me is the people that are making the programs for you. So that's the point at which you want a big discussion. It's right at the top of production, much like Alison's saying. It's about preparation really, and it's also about having a big discussion about who's going to make that program for you, because you need to trust those people to deliver you a great program so that you don't get to that point where you're giving reams and reams of notes. So if anything, there's probably quite a lot of attention paid to who, what the forming of your team essentially. And I think the commissioner should be involved at that level for certain levels of production, and at that point then you say, okay, we've got a great team together, I can trust you to go and make a fabulous program that we commissioned and that we're all excited about.
So if you were to go back now from your elevated position as commissioner to the humble role of producer, what lesson would you take with you? What would be the thing that you would most want to take back into that world?
I just talk to them more. I talk to the commissioner as much as possible and as much as you feel you can do without being in touch too much. But it's about honesty. It's about picking up the phone when there's a problem and not hiding it. And we're all in it together. We're all trying to make a good program that we want to put on telly at the end of the day. And so that I sort of as soon as you feel as though you're working against each other or pulling in different directions, then the whole thing falls apart.
And when it's finally on TV, Alison, are you watching it with pride and pleasure, or are you watching it with your head in your hands because you remember every awful moment of the production?
When I used to make programmes, I used to have my head in my hands, and you always saw the thing that you hadn't quite fixed in the edit or you wish you'd done differently. As a commissioner, you just generally feel really happy. If it's a supplier that you've gone on this long journey, and we've all sort of articulated how the journey works really well, and if it has worked really well, you just feel really happy for the production team. It's the nicest thing. I always, and I'm sure people in the room, and I haven't done this, so I apologise, but I try to always send my thank yous before it TXs, because I know from when I made programmes, some of the things I'm most proud of didn't rate, and some of the things I thought were a bit shoddy did really well. So I don't think we should be judged by ratings. So I always try and send my thank yous before the ratings are in, so that they're not predicated on the ratings. But then if it also rates, that's just a brilliant moment, that you can do. It's fantastic. And I used to work in formats and features, and they're so hard to get right, and companies are always trying to get that returning series, and so many indies business model is sort of predicated upon needing that returning series. And so if something goes out and it does well, like when Eat Well first went out and did well, and for RDF that's fantastic, and they put so much into it, you just feel really happy.
It's funny, I do think as well, I noticed this when I came over to this side, I feel success and failure a bit more keenly than I did when I was a producer. Obviously I wanted all my shows that I made to work, but because we feel very passionate about the shows we put on the channel. And and I send my thank yous before it goes out as well, because I don't believe it's all about ratings. I believe it's about sort of quality of the program and the experience you've had making it. But if a program that you love doesn't work for whatever reason, it's like a dagger through the heart as a channel head and a commissioner. Much more than I expected it to be. I expected to have a bit of a sort of colder viewpoint of these things, but you really don't.
Do you ever feel it'd be nice if someone would kind of rearrange show business so you didn't have those failure moments? It's just always success.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We wouldn't all be sat here then, would we? We'd all be on our desert island drinking cocktails.
That's why we tried to develop an algorithm, you see.
So now we're going to throw it over to the audience. So everybody should have a card, a bingo card. And has everybody got a pen? And it's pretty simple. We're going to play a tape for Commissioner Lingo Bingo. And in that tape are a number of red cards that flash up with key phrases that commissioners have used, and I think you'll probably recognise a lot of them from meetings you've been to. And if you are the person who successfully completes your bingo card, stand up and shout house or Lingo Bingo, that's up to you, and you will be the winner of this signed Ben Fogle and Meerkat picture. So let's roll the tape. Thank you very much to all our panellists, to David, Greg, Alison and Phil, and thanks also to ITV for being sponsors of the session, and thank you to all for coming. Thank you.